Hi, thank you for listening and now watching Intuition Your First Sense as it goes to my YouTube channel and with Vicky's editing skills. So let's be kind out there, okay? There's a whole level of learning that goes into this creating podcasts and YouTube videos. I have a whole new respect for people in that regards, but I really appreciate you tuning in, being part of what started as podcast episode 79 right now. And that's always exciting for me. And a lot of the times, because you people make me think, I like to think, but there's more. If someone's waiting on you, if someone's expecting the episode to be up on a Wednesday, like mine drop, and trust me, people let me know. There was one time in 79 episodes, it just didn't get sent over from the hosting site. And I got emails, I got texts, where's my podcast? And I'm like, wow, you people are really efficient. So the consistency of that is really important, and that's what this episode is about. It's about creating the patterns, the habits, the things that support us in our lifetime so that I truly believe we can be in joy. And while living an intuitive life means listening to that guidance that comes in and that comes up from the heart and everything, we better balance that with logical thought and with our humanness, because as we blend our soul with our human self, it ends up creating just this dynamic being that we all are. And without some consistent process to that, you can become ungrounded. You can become a little too flighty, a little difficult for people to be around, actually, if you're just a little bit too much in that non-physical space. Like everything is energy. Well, of course everything's energy, but not everything that happens is a result of some magical system that happens. Sometimes a frog's a frog. So with consistency, you end up having things that are dependable within your life, right? So you create the patterns, the systems, just the fact that you brush your teeth, I hope, twice a day becomes a thing that's consistent, that then gets you the nice pearly whites, that keeps you from having a lot of dental work needed. So this week, that's what we're talking about. And consistency it's an agreement or a harmony of parts that features to one another or a whole, according to Merriam-Webster anyway. So when I read that, I was like, what the heck are they saying? And that I had to think about it, because agreement or harmony of parts or features to one another or a whole. And I'm like, I'm still not getting it. So it was a little dense when I looked it up. But then I thought about it and I'm like, wow, that actually does make sense, because as you're intending to create this life and this way of being, hopefully, that you really enjoy your life and that you have your spiritual connection and you have your humanness and your relationships, of course, it all has to connect. Of course, if you're in it and you show up in relationship, you have to be consistent, because if you're not, just people will let you go. So that's the features to one, or one another rather, and then that contributes to the whole. So how does that all come together? How do you correspond to your own surroundings? How do you connect? And do you connect? Maybe you don't connect. Maybe you're feeling like nothing is hooked in, or there is no consistency, because right now it's in upheaval, between schools going back and not knowing if they're going to have to return to all online, or if you're doing a hybrid, or if you're working from home, are you ever going to go back to your office? There's a lack of consistency right now. And part of the reason I wanted to do this was because I wanted to talk about how we interact with our daily lives and how we can create a safety net, almost like a surety within yourself, and that we can, I went from we to you, so that we can create within ourselves, and that it, from that, create a just more of a peace, like a peace within you, PEACE, within you. So I believe that consistency builds a habit, but a habit is also consistency. Ironic, eh? So if you're thinking about what would you like to do, for me lately it's writing. I love to write. When I get paid to write, I will be very ecstatic, because I absolutely love the process of just sussing something out, figuring out what I'm trying to say, and telling a story. That's part of this podcasting thing, right? That it's a storytelling, only it's auditory. So a habit is something that you do over and over and over again, right? So whether it's a supportive habit or not, sometimes we have a habit like chewing your nails, or why can't I think of another habit that's not quite supportive? Worrying is a habit. It's not something that is innate within us. It has to be taught to us, and it becomes a habit. So that habit happens because of consistency. At some point, you were consistent in your worrying, and nobody ever said, is that getting you anywhere? Is that helping you? So they become this recycling symbol, which is good, because if you want to create a habit that's supportive, such as I wanted to begin writing every day, so I set that habit, and it might only be a paragraph, and that's okay. Or it might be ideas for future shows or classes or online courses that I promise are in development. But that, because I want to build that writing habit that eventually becomes the second book. So there has to be consistency that does that. And one of the things that I am not able to tolerate in myself is being a hypocrite. So if I suggest to someone, either through coaching or through this show, that you create consistency or habit, you better believe a couple weeks before I'm working on it, so that I can also show up and say, these are some of the things you might bump into. It's important because, much like the brushing your teeth example, if we don't have things that are somewhat concrete in our lives right now, it could be very easy to float off and to feel ungrounded and to feel like nothing is within our say or even a certain level of control. So it's important. It's also important if you want to have any kind of success. You've heard that expression, overnight success, right? And likely they practice, or they were in their business for decades even. And it's just that we just heard about them. So if you want to have any kind of business success, there has to be consistency. If you want to have success in your relationships, you have to stay consistent in communication. You have to stay open. In exercise, recently I have a herniated disc, and I know that it's getting better because of my consistently but exercising it 3 times a day and then going to PT twice a week. So, and I can see the progress, which is also where some of the idea of this podcast came from, I'll be honest. Because as I was lying there doing my stretches, I'm like, wow, this is really paying off. I have less sciatic pain. I haven't sworn 52 times today, because for a while there I was getting quite the vocabulary. I wasn't proud of myself, but it was happening. And then I realized it was the consistency, it was the commitment to my health, to myself, and to those around me, so I wasn't a miserable you-know-what. So it's important to decide even what is it that you would like to be consistent in. And I would suggest picking something that means something to you, but also something that has a little bit of fun to it. So even though the exercises sometimes hurt or cause discomfort, they don't really hurt, I love a goal. And the goal is to be running again. So as long as that goal is there, I can withstand the somewhat, I'll admit, I thought boring exercises that likely if I'd been doing all along would have had a stronger core. I probably would have hit that bump on my bike and blown out the disc. But this is how we learn. So in creating consistency, you also learn, where are my blocks? Where is my excuse-o-meter? That excuse-o-meter will come up big time. Because consistency can be in eating well, and in giving to your body the water that it needs, and to create that where it almost becomes like a non-thinking space. You just do it because you do it. So, and because you've set up those practices. So practices become habits, which then become the consistency, which then becomes success. So sometimes you just got to dig in and apply yourself. A lot of the times when I'm working with someone and we're looking at short-term goals and we're looking at, okay, what are some of the doubts? What are some of the blocks? Are there any? Sometimes there's not, and sometimes it's just poor commitment to something and actually getting up and doing it. So the points of where you have to dig in and just do it feel so good afterwards. Like, have you ever put off doing the dishes, or put off organizing that closet, or calling someone, or returning somebody's email? You put it off, and through some kind of procrastination method, and then you realize, let me get that done. You get it done. It feels so good. One of the things that I actually suggest in my coaching practice is that the happy dance comes out. And when you accomplish something, you put the laundry away, you contact that person, you close that deal, there better be a happy dance when you do that. So by digging in and applying yourself, you get to see the results from that. And results happen again because we're willing to look at, what do I want, and what practices need to be put in place. There are some points that I follow for myself and that I suggest that I'm going to include here when we come back from this message. So stick around, would you? Hi there. Did you know that you can join me for Wisdom Wednesday, the last Wednesday of every month, where there's a subject that we cover, and it has to do with developing your intuition and coaching, and it's a supportive group where we laugh and we do a great meditation at the end, and it allows you to connect with others from the comfort of wherever you are. And for $8 a month, gives you a little bit of connection to your own soul. So join us, won't you? Go to vickibaird.com/booking and book your subscription today. Thanks for sticking around. It's a little different when you're recording the video. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this, so we may be just getting rid of commercials or something. I have no idea. I'm just going to have fun with this, and you guys can let me know how it goes. So there are 5 points that I use in helping myself be consistent, because if you get too many, like if you have too many, I'm going to do this, you won't. unless you're somebody who is so focused, you're not having any fun. Or you, a lot of the times what will happen is you become so focused and then it drops off, after a week or so. So like when you go on a really strict eating plan and a couple weeks in, the natural aspect of, nah, I'm done with this, because your body's not getting other nutrients that it might need. The same thing will happen if you have too many I'm going to's. So like I've said in previous podcasts, micro movements matter. It's my 3M. I really believe in micro movements. And the more I practice this in my own life, the more I am amazed at just how well that works. Because it takes the pressure off when we say to ourselves, okay, well, I got this. I'm going to do micro movements. And if I do micro movements consistently, I'm still going to end up where I intended to be, and maybe even in a more appreciative space because I didn't push myself so hard. There have been some races that I've been in where I've watched people run the whole time, and I've even been this person where you run, and there's someone who run walks, and they're coming in ahead of me. And that's my style now, when I can run, is to do the Galloway method, it's called, because those micro movements, those micro steps of running, walking, allowed them to consistently move forward. Whereas if they ran straight through, maybe they would get slower and slower in pace because they got more tired. And yes, there's conditioning and all that kind of stuff. But, some of us, although I believe everybody is made to run, some of us are not exactly the most streamlined, shall we say. And that idea, though, of taking it in bite-sized pieces and micro movements, it's just so refreshing. So the first step is to be clear on what the goal is. Let me try that one more time. What the goal even is. Because if it's too abstract or too big, it's likely to not be practiced or attained, because our brain can only fathom so much, and it doesn't do well with infinity or eternal for that matter. So what is the goal that you're intending to set? Is it that one room that gets cleaned out? A lot of people are doing that, creating their home offices and the student spaces and everything. So is it that? Is there a next level in your business fiscally that you would like to reach? Is there a meditative practice? Is there you want to read a book before you go to bed at night instead of being on your phone, or just get more veggies in? So be very clear on what the goal is, so that when you meet it, again, you can do the happy dance, and then you can move the marker. You can move to the next space. But it's like if we're working on goals and someone wants to do a year plan, I'll do it with them. But then I'll say, okay, now what's the 6-month plan? Okay, what's the month plan? What's the 2-week plan? Because the year will avoid it. We'll do other things. We just won't get there. Most people. I'm well aware that there are exceptions to every rule. So then the next step is actually to take those steps, those micro steps. Whatever those movements were that you decided you were going to do, you have to take them. There is no stinking magic wand. I have a sign in my living room, used to be in my office, that says, life, it has no remote. You have to get up and change it yourself. And that is true of everything. All these do it in a weekend, raise your numbers, get there fast. It's just not how our conditioning works, or how consistency works. So you have to take those micro steps and then let them add up and then celebrate what they added up to. So it's like, you know that expression of you can't eat just one. So those things add up too. It's a good. Why do you think they came up with it? They knew that more if somebody did one chip after another chip after another chip after another chip, they're going to buy more bags of chips. So it works for them, right? So be willing to look at the emotions that will come up, because typically about the third micro movement in, there's some kind of feedback loop that's going on, and some aspect of yourself, likely your subconscious, that is communicating and saying, who do you think you are? Are you being too big for your britches? Or this is too hard? Usually has the word too assigned to it. Be aware of them and then face them. Your emotions are nothing to be afraid of. So if you look at them and say, okay, what's coming up here? Be inquisitive. What is my emotional body communicating to me? What am I trying to learn here? There'll be less friction and less static in your head. So if you're facing them, be kind. Ask how you can help yourself. I had one just this morning. I was doing my exercises, not to beat a point, but I was. And I've made that my meditation practice as well, because I also like efficiency. So as I'm breathing in, something came to me and I became aware of what I was blocking in my own life, and then how I had an experience this weekend where, when you get in that full-on belly laugh about something silly, that my head went to that was so fun. Why don't I laugh that hard more often? And then it circled around to allowing myself, feeling like I deserve to have that levity, because although I feel like I'm a very humorous person, I can get very focused and caught up in the seriousness and the reverence of things that I forget to be silly. And silly in its, I just learned this last week from another podcast, in its origin of the word means to be blessed. So perhaps we could add a little bit more silliness to those emotions. When the emotions come up, have a conversation with them and see if you can shift them just a smidgen. So can you go from frustrated to neutral, or to inquisitive? Can you allow the anger to shift to hurt, because that's usually what it wants to go to, and then once it goes there, you can shimmy it to up the scale to healing. So be honest with yourself and forgive the slips that will happen. And this is the next step. There will be a little bit of back and forth, or forth and back. When you're creating new patterns and new habits, there's such a defining word. There can be an experience where you the critic steps in and some of those messages get in, and then the slip ups or the forgot. For instance, over the weekend I didn't do any writing, and on Monday morning I was a little kibitzing in my head, and then said, you know what? It's fine. The world does not come to an end because Vicky didn't meet 2 of her days that she said she would write. So being honest with myself that I didn't want to do any inquiry over the weekend. I wanted to have fun. My back was feeling pretty good, and I wanted to be in that. I wanted to enjoy it. So they strengthen us, much like when a bone breaks, it's typically stronger afterwards. So if you can look at when something loses momentum or slides back a little bit as a place of strength, what is it showing you? What is it teaching you? How are you going to create more of an awareness in yourself so that you can see it coming? If you forgot to do something, just realize and even appreciate that you remembered it at some point and that you're going to do it now. So you will forget. You will eat too many carbs. You will decide to take a rest day instead of working out, which is smart sometimes anyway. It's good to do. It's good to recognize that perfection does not exist. I was just working with someone today where that message that perfection is what we're striving for, but if it doesn't exist, how the heck are you going to get there anyway? So a little bit of being kind, still committing and still creating the consistency, but recognizing that, oh, I'm going to build that consistency because I'm not avoiding the fact that I just ate that whole sleeve of crackers. I'm actually looking at it and saying, okay, that is not best serving me. So the next time I want to eat the whole sleeve, maybe I don't buy them and bring them in the house. Or maybe I eat consciously. So if I am eating that whole sleeve, I didn't do it with my head checked out. So if it sounds like I'm talking from experience, I am. So have a commitment on the calendar. If there's no end date, we will, days go into days go into days. I mean, it's the middle of September right now. Does anybody feel like it should be the middle of September? Things move quickly. So if there's no date on the calendar, it's too easy to let stuff slide. So put it in ink or put it digitally. Whatever works for you. Every one of the task applications can send you a notification. I use Basecamp for my business, but Google Gmail has tasks. You can use Trello, Evernote. There's just so many different ways to remind yourself. There's countdown timers. There's so many ways that we can hold ourselves accountable because that's what this is about. The thing that I think is most frustrating for people is to realize when they, maybe look back a couple weeks, months, years, decades even. I've had that conversation with people that you realize that I don't think any time is necessarily wasted if you've eventually learned from it, but there's a sadness that can be there. And I could have had this done by now. Notice I said could, not should, because guilt has no place here. So put the commitment on the calendar, commit to yourself, and then put it on there. And even the consistencies, if you're a person who writes things out, there are a lot of planners that have that you can use. So the next step is to consider an accountability partner or coach. Consider someone, it can be a friend, it can be a coach, it can be, a mentor, but consider having someone outside of yourself that you are accountable to, for. You're committing to yourself, but that you're accountable to some other. I've done this with friends. I've done it in mastermind groups. My own coach. There's a commitment to you guys every Wednesday. I said I'd do it, so it shows up on Wednesday. And yes, there are some Tuesday nights where I'm recording this, editing it, and getting it uploaded before the publication time. But that accountability allows us to learn and see our brilliance. It allows for us to expand as souls, as humans, as contributors to our planet and our universe. And I really do hope that people eventually come to realize that accountability is something to be even striving for, because without the bullwhip of perfection, it feels really good. So the partner or the coach can also reflect to you that you have made progress, because sometimes we get too in our head and we can't see that we've accomplished things as we've gone along. And oftentimes I'm saying to someone, okay, but when we talked about this, you started at, maybe even beyond the zero part. And now you're in a place where, you've created the corporation, or you've got your first contract, or you fired that client that was a pain in the choochie boomy, so that you can open up the other parts of your business to succeed. And it's hard for us to see sometimes because we're in it. So an accountability partner or a coach can reflect that back to you, and it acts as a little infusion of belief in self. So it's important that when you're communicating with another person, that you're also communicating with yourself. This isn't one of the points, but it's coming up off the top of my head, so I'm going to add it as a little addendum. If you give yourself an intention of meeting and observing and recognizing that I've been honest about my what my goal is, and I want it, it gives you that check-in. It gives you a check-in. So I believe it was Steve Jobs who said, paraphrasing here, I have looked in the mirror every day and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And if that answer was no, too many days in a row, sometimes it's no, I don't want to do that today. But it's not the too many days in a row. If there's too many days in a row, then he said he knew he needed to change something. And that to me has always been impactful, because that ability to look at yourself in the mirror, first of all, kudos. I really hope it was Steve Jobs. If not, I'll correct it in the show notes. But if you're facing that too many days in a row, well, maybe your goal needs to shift. Maybe it needs to change. And do you even want it? Is it something that is worth being consistent for? And, maybe something else needs to show up. Okay. So when you consider consistency in your life, what is that? What is a good consistent run? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a year? A decade? Like what is that time frame? Because while we may be a soul that's eternal, we work with time as humans. And if we're going to merge this soul and human self to be living the best example and experience we have, these are some things we need to merge. You need to be looking at what is my idea of consistency. If I string 3 days together, do I feel consistent? Oh man, start there. Do not jump to 10 weeks or something like that. Start with the 3 days. The ability to also connect with self, to be listening to your intuition, to use your intuition, happens through consistency. This is not something that most of the time you get struck on the head and all of a sudden it's there and you have all this knowledge. It's based on practice and being consistent with listening to your own voice. And if you want to know who you are and you want to merge that soul and physical self, well, then consistency has to be part of that as well. So I wish you the best in this, and certainly let me know if you have any questions. And if you would like to do some coaching or attend Wisdom Wednesday, I would love to have you there. And I'm so grateful and thank you for being here. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Intuition, Your First Sense. As always, please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening to it. Leave a review and take a minute to share it with a friend. You can find me all across social media at Coach Vicki Baird, and you can book a virtual session with me from wherever you are in the world at vickibaird.com/booking. That's VICKIBAIRD.com/booking. Thank you again, and see you on the next episode.